life is very subjective and very fuzzy, and there's a lot of in-betweens and like maybes and stuff like that. So games are very poor at conveying that very subjective feel. In Crusader Kings 2, either you're doing one thing or you're doing another thing, and that's not history. History, and I have a history background, history is all about, well, maybe this happened, or maybe we can think about it a different way. What games are very good at is teaching an intuition or a way of thinking. They're very bad at conveying facts because they're very misleading. Number 5, this is a quote from one of my favorite authors. Who recognizes this quote? This is William Gibson, who did Neuromancer and pattern recognition. It's, we live in the future, but it is not evenly distributed. I hate this picture. This picture is terrible. I got it off Google Images, so I have no idea who the kids are. I'm going to tell you everything that's wrong with this picture. Number 1, the reason you have circle tables in a classroom is to promote conversation. If you're going to have them all stare at a screen, they can go and do that elsewhere. Second off, you see that box, that wooden box? That's called a toy, and they should be playing with it right now.
Why is that toy better than whatever they're doing? Why is it intrinsically better just because it's a box?
Because it's inherently more flexible than anything they could possibly be playing with on that iPad. Number 3, which I'm getting to, this is a very rich classroom. This is intensely rich and also very white. iPads are expensive. iPads are very expensive. Now, an iPad pretty much can't do everything that a computer can. So the cost of an iPad, as far as the school is concerned, is the cost of a computer plus $400. Now that is very expensive for almost all school systems. In the school I worked at, our computer lab had 3 computers. We had 3 computers. They were servers. We ran everything else on dummy terminals. They weren't real computers. They were just stupid machines. It's very cost effective to do it that way. This is very much the norm. We are not the exception in this respect. Much of the funding for educational games is being thrown at iPads because they're the new thing. If you develop on an iPad, they're a very closed platform, which means that you can pretty much only develop for the iPad unless you have a really big budget. If you develop for the iPad, you cannot provide tools for the schools that need it the most. And that's a real shame. And I think that's a huge problem with almost all educational development. If you are making an educational game for the classroom, you have a moral imperative to keep your system requirements low and make the game as cross-platform as possible. Number 6, and this is something rarely talked about, learning is also for adults. Who's an adult in the room? Who considers themselves adults? Okay, easier question. Who likes games? No kidding! It's like we're at PAX or something. There's 2 reasons why most educational games are for kids. The first is that they're mostly for classrooms. The second reason is that people still think of games as basically juvenile. And that's absurd. I think this room is demonstrative proof that adults play video games. Who here knows everything about the world now? Everything. Who knows everything about the world? Yeah, so you don't have to play games, like whatever. But for the rest of us, we could stand to learn a lot from educational games. We should have games that are more complex, that have more complex moral choices, and they have more questions than answers. This is something that most people are not doing, but I think is a real shame. So, with that all said, let's talk about what educational games are good at, because they are in fact good for certain things. That's what they're not good at. I'm going to tell you what they're good for. First off, games are really fun. Who's played Torchlight? Torchlight is so much fun. I love Torchlight. And it's a pretty proven fact that games are awesome. And you can sit in front of a game, and you can be playing a game, and then it's like 3 in the morning, and then it's like 6 in the morning, and then it's like noon, like it's amazing. And it's like nothing else. Games are unbelievable. They're incredibly captivating, and they're really, really fun. Now, this would be the point where I would tell you what fun is, and I'm not going to do that. Because I think that fun is about as subjective as what makes a good movie from a bad movie. It's a mixture of budget, good design decisions, and dark magic, and you put that all into a cauldron and stir it. It's really complex, and I don't think you can break it down to a discrete list of like the 6 things that designate a fun game. We're not going to do that. Bottom line is, I know what fun is, you know what fun is. It's probably very different for everyone. But games can be fun. The other thing that you might not think about that much is that every single game, no, not Math Blaster, every other game promotes learning. Every single game, every single one. This is a core piece of what it means to be a game. Games promote critical thinking. This is Dwarf Fortress. Who knows Dwarf Fortress? Yeah! What? Everyone, there's more Dwarf Fortress people than Torchlight people? That's amazing. That's so cool. So I love Dwarf Fortress. This is a hard game to play, and it's very complex. What a game does at its base level is, unless it's like Call of Duty 12 and you know what you're doing already, you start out with a game, you don't really know how to play it, it's a little hard, you start mastering the controls, game throws some more challenges at you, you figure those out, you get to the end of the game. You have just learned something, you have learned to play the game. What a game is it starts you out, presents a challenge, and makes you overcome it. That's what a game is. That's learning. That's critical thinking. That's all you do in games. So, this is a very hard to read interface. It's probably really hard in this light, but Dwarf Fortress is it's all ASCII graphics, and what we're looking at right now is there's a couple of dwarves that are chopping wood over there, and they're going to go take it back to the wood stockpile. Then a carpenter is going to take it out of the stockpile, turn it into wood crafts, and then put it into the craft stockpile, and then drop it into the depot. The depot is going to sit there until the elves, no, not the elves, the dwarves. You don't want to put wooden crafts for elves. You're going to have the wooden crafts for the dwarves. This is a very complex game. It's really hard. And you learn an awful lot. And more importantly, you learn an awful lot, and if this is the sort of thing you find fun, you have fun doing it. When I play Dwarf Fortress, I think about Dwarf Fortress all the time. And this is probably true for anyone who's played these sufficiently complex game. We're like, can I swear in this room? Does anyone have any problems with that? Okay, I could be walking down the street going, fucking goddamn magma pipes are like not pumping lava directly all the way up, and like I'm just like walking to like the barber shop or something, like this is just going over and over and over in my head. And games are an immensely powerful educational tool in that respect. They demand critical thinking, and you want to do it. And you want to do it. So there's a huge caveat to this. If I play a lot of Dwarf Fortress, I'm never going to win, because you can't win that particular game. But I can get pretty good, and what I will have learned is how to play Dwarf Fortress. This doesn't have any bearing on real life to speak of.
Wow. You learn problem solving.
Supply chain management.
Absolutely. But he's right. But in an analog to how it took me 80 hours to learn the DC Metro system. You're doing an awful lot besides that. Mostly killing unicorns and turning their unicorn horns into totem poles or some shit.
Because you have to look stuff up on the internet to play better, to learn more about the game, you learn how to research.
Absolutely. But that's, again, it's something you're doing alongside it. It's still a very inefficient way to learn how to research.
Right.
You're certainly learning. And to clarify on that, there are many examples of ways you can take games and find the educational component in them. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that's much more efficient and much more interesting, at least for me. So, this brings me to my third part. This is something that games do much more rarely than learning, which is every single case except Math Blaster. Which is that games can be art. They can absolutely be art. I don't want to get into that. But if you think that games can be art, the bottom line is that games can be art. And more to the point, as long as there are English classes and field trips to museums, I will forever say that art is education. Who here has played To the Moon? To the Moon is incredible. This is it's somewhere between a game and a visual novel, and for the purposes of this, I'm going to say it's a game, because whatever. And it's a game about death, and old age, and regret, and mental disability. It takes about 5 hours to play. I played through it in, I think, 2 sittings, and when I was done, I thought about the world differently. Now that's huge. That's absolutely huge. This is what games can do. Whew, I am losing my voice. So, the bottom line is that I have a secret recipe for how to make a quality educational game. And I'm going to tell all you, but since it's a secret, you can't tell. So the secret recipe is this. That fun is the same thing as learning, which is the same thing as enriching souls. What I did not just say is this. I didn't mean some like ridiculous Venn diagram where we got like the fun piece, the enriching souls piece, and the learning piece, and like right in the middle is the one you want. That's not what I'm talking about. Because if you do things this way, what you get is something like Assassin's Creed 3, where you have like the colonial Boston component, that's the learning component, and you have the murdering component, and that's the fun component. But these are disconnected. Or in the case of Dwarf Fortress, where you learn how to research, and that's more the enriching souls thing, and the learning thing is more how to like turn unicorn horns into totem poles. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that they are synonymous. This is the Venn diagram. That they're all the same thing. The same exact thing. Now, an example, where am I in this? Okay, so, the question comes down to what is enriching souls? Because I've been throwing that term around a lot. So, like the first two things, which were fun and learning, this is both a fairly specific definition and also very fuzzy. One way to think about what enriching souls means is to ask, what should people know? Because as teachers, I can tell you, we are not there just to give them knowledge. Raw knowledge is useless, absolutely useless. If I wanted to teach kids raw knowledge, I would put them in front of all those dummy terminals and have them play Dwarf Fortress. And they would play Dwarf Fortress for hours, and then they would like either get frustrated, they would get frustrated, but they would also learn something. And they would learn how to play Dwarf Fortress. So insofar as raw knowledge is useful, then yes, by all means, let them play video games. But we're talking about a specific kind of knowledge. When teachers talk about knowledge, we implicitly mean socially constructive knowledge. We're talking about knowledge that will get you somewhere. Something that will make the world better. A fun and captivating game could elucidate new mindsets, or new theories, or ideas, or social skills, or new perspectives and new ways to like look at things. This is what video games can do. This is the sort of knowledge we can provide. Now, another game that I think is pretty good at this is my own. This is neocolonialism. Who's seen it? Who's been able to see it? Cool. I've been showcasing this at the Indie Mega booth for a couple of days. And I came up with this paradigm for an educational game first, and then I started developing this. So neocolonialism is a Marxist game where your goal is to extract as much wealth from the world as possible in 12 turns. You're a finance banker, you buy and sell votes, you make free trade agreements, you manipulate the IMF. It's really, really fun. It's way fun. You also learn a lot of theory while you're doing it. And you start to feel really bad because you realize, hopefully you realize, that you're impoverishing most of the world in order to make the maximum profit. In this game, it is in your interest, in other words, to keep the world poor. That's how you make the most amount of money. And when you realize that, you ought to feel bad, and you also ought to have learned something. So this, in other words, is all three